Hello, everyone, and happy International Women's Day. I'm Joey Rosenberg, Chief Leadership Officer of Women Who Code, and we are thrilled to have an incredible panel of talented professionals here to celebrate International Women's Day and discuss what it means to choose to challenge, the theme this year for 2021. This year, International Women's Day is all about raising visibility, raising awareness against gender bias, and fighting for equality. And this panel is comprised of experts in their fields who are here to share their experience and unpack what that means. First, I'd like to go around and ask everyone to introduce themselves so you get to know who's on the call with us today. Tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're located, what you do. And at Women Who Code, we always have a question of the day. So I want to know, what is your career superpower? What's the thing that has really stood out about you over the last year as a strength in your career? Amanda, how about you kick it off for us?
So, hi everyone, my name is Amanda Flink. I am a senior front-end engineer at Quadpay and Zip in the US. I live in Brooklyn. And one strength that I've noticed about myself this year is that I have been cultivating my interviewing skills and have been trusted by my company to conduct interviews across the board for teams other than my own.
Thank you for joining us today. How about you, Cheryl?
Hi, I'm Cheryl Gledhill. I'm the Director of Product at Zip, so I work out of Sydney, Australia. I've found my superpower is kind of in that emotional intelligence space. When it comes to kind of staying calm under pressure, I'm very, very hard to panic. I'm very hard to stress out. I seem to be able to kind of keep a cool head while everybody's running around screaming. So that's been very handy working through a pandemic over the last year.
Cheryl, we need more people like you in the world. Thank you for being here with us today. Claire, could you introduce yourself?
Hi, my name's Claire. I am currently in Sydney. I'm an engineering manager at Safety Culture, looking after the IoT and analytics teams. I'm also a director here for Women in Code in Sydney, previously a city lead in London. For my superpower, I have noticed that I tend to observe and like to get a holistic view of things. I think for 2020, the thing that stood out was probably around resilience, joining a new company in a pandemic, or working from home, and then having to launch sensors out into the market. So that's probably something that I experienced last year.
Wow, that is so important, especially today. Resiliency is something we all need more of. Thank you for being here today. Fatima, would you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Fatima. Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be here. I'm from Sydney. I am a mobile developer at Zip. And I think my superpower is that I'm just very passionate about trying and learning new things. So I'm just always there to get out of my comfort zone and go wild.
Nice. Thank you for joining us today. Jane, how about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Shih. I'm based in Taipei, Taiwan. I'm the founder of WWCode, and I'm also the senior director of Women Who Code. I've been serving as director for Women Who Code Taipei for over 5 years, enjoying every day. My superpower I discovered last year was I was able to move a physical international conference about open source to online version, and was able to also get almost the same or even better global reach. So that stuff made I can really feel I'm very proud of myself and my team over the last year. Thank you.
That is amazing. Thank you, Jane, for being here with us today. Natasha, how about you?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me here today. My name's Natasha and I'm from Perth, Australia. I work as a principal geophysicist in the oil and gas industry, but I'm also a board advisor for Women Who Code and a leadership facilitator. And the superpower that I've been practicing over the last 12 months or so has been stepping more into digital innovation and digital transformation in my company, but also marrying that with the work we're doing in organisational development and building leadership capabilities for people to support and drive digital transformation.
Wow, fantastic. Thank you for being here with us. Rafna, welcome. Could you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. So I'm Rafna. I am day job. I'm from Denver, Colorado, in US. So I am a tech consultant helping entrepreneurs or founders to understand technical needs, market research, building prototypes, creating roadmaps. I work as a tech lead with nonprofit organization building websites, apps, softwares. I'm founder of Activator. It's an initiative to empower women to activate their tech career through education, experience, mentorship, opportunities. I am director of Women Who Code Boulder, Denver, and I'm also leading a program called Career Returnship at Women Who Code, which helps women returning to work after career break. My superpower I've noticed about myself is I'm very patient and calm. So I respond, I'm very good with multitasking. So you could see in my profession that. And I'm also a person who responds quickly to the changing priorities. So I'm like a kick on the trigger thought process person. So everyone is trusting with me that if they approach me with any kind of issues, I'll be able to resolve it.
Excellent. Thank you so much for being here today. With all of this talent on the panel, I'm really excited to unpack gender bias. So first, just to set the stage, I think there's no dispute that gender bias exists, but I think what people don't often realize is what that means. And so what's one word that you would use to describe gender bias in the industry? Amanda, what do you think?
So I would actually describe it as sneaky, because a lot of gender bias and other kinds of bias comes from implicit bias or your unconscious bias, which means two big things. It means it's shaped by the society and the people around you, which means it's very widespread. And it also means that it's harder to change over time, which makes it more frustrating because it's a more deeply rooted bias. So, yeah.
Wow, definitely. That's an interesting way to describe it, and I 100% agree. Claire, what do you think?
I think it's complex. So I think sneaky is a very good word to describe it, where people may not realize that they have the bias. It's also quite complicated because this stems from behaviors that have been in society over time. You know, if you're thinking about what subjects are boys and girls good at, for example, there are biases there. You know, I grew up with someone's in my family saying boys are good at math, and it's like, are you sure? Like, I think I'm good at math too. So it is quite complicated because it comes up from a lot of things that have built up in society. And to second what Amanda mentioned, what tends to happen is people could miss out potentially, right? Like if someone doesn't recognize or doesn't see that, you know, men or women are good at the same thing, then you could miss out on an opportunity.
Definitely. And let's talk a little bit about how that makes its way into technology. So what are some ways that gender bias ends up influencing technology, whether it's the industry or the products that it creates or the team experience that you have? Jane, I saw you nodding along when Claire was speaking. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Related to the gender bias in technology, I remember one time I interviewed one of the top executive in our industry. He's a male, and he actually pretty bluntly or honestly told me the concerns when he has hiring needs, and a lot of his engineering managers are actually also male. So one of the concerns they have is if they hire more female engineers in the team, they would have to do more trainings. So that's one of the things that that's really the honest feedback from them, and that's one of the things that for me to think about the gender bias is actually an opportunity to improve, not only really just for us to promote maybe more companies with better hiring policies or really put into diversity into practice, but also really just to promote more diverse workforce, and wanted to really make things happen for all of us. So these are things I feel like it's still existing in our industry. I really appreciate those honest feedback, and also wanted to see if we can have more companies that join forcefully be able to put those diversity into real actions for us.
Fatima, what about you? How have you seen gender bias showing up in technology and the products that we experience, or in the way that they're built?
Just like everyone said, it's usually happening all the time, but we just didn't notice it. So when you go back and look at for example, Siri or Alexa, those virtual personal assistants, when they came out with a default female voice, because it's like a stereotype that make the majority of secretaries and assistants, they are female. So that's like highly biased, but at the time that it came out, we probably didn't notice it.
And do you know what's interesting about that, Fatima, is in England, Siri is a man because they thought English men wouldn't take orders from a woman. So it's amazing. There's so much to unpack there, right?
Yeah, these things, they came up with that default thing at first, but eventually they all had to add some variations and stuff to just make it less biased. Even things like Apple Health Kit, when it came out, it had all kind of specialized tracking system, like your copper intake, but it didn't have period tracking for women, which is a very natural thing for us. So yeah, those things, unfortunately, they exist, and they just big products from Apple, which is a big company. They came out like that.
And I think a lot of that is because product teams they can tend to skew quite male. And we think of male as the default. So you think of a crash test dummy, or you think of the way they kind of do even medical tests. It's always based on men because women are complicated. So therefore, all of these things get built for men as the default, and then women become this minority that need to be catered for. And I've got kind of very big feelings about product teams. They can't see what they don't know. And that's how we've ended up with, products like Twitter, where you've got a bunch of young white men who built it to talk to each other. It never occurred to them that it would be a platform for abuse, because they don't tend to get abused when they go online. They just get to be the default. And it kind of happens from birth. So it is a kind of a thing that has just happened over the years, that male has become the default. And it's a thing that has to change as we get more diverse product teams.
It's interesting that you say that as well. I'm reading a book called Invisible Women, and there are a lot of examples in there. They talk about the crash dummies, and they talk about, a heart attack and symptoms, and how if a woman walks in, we may be misdiagnosed, for instance. The other interesting thing that has come up is around, voice recognition and facial recognition, where the training data has gone through hasn't necessarily been of not enough diversity, right? And so I think there was something that came out in voice recognition where women what they were saying was not recognized, and so women had to work harder to be recognized, for instance. So it's interesting how that can play out into products and those decisions that we make when we're building products.
Natasha, in the work that you've done with the leadership model at Women Who Code, you've done a lot of work around the responsible mindset. What do you think is the role for technologists and scientists in activating their responsible mindset to come up with some solutions?
Yeah, look, I think it's really important that every individual takes on the responsibility of making sure that they bring or allow space for diversity in not only their product design, what they're actually trying to build, but also in the processes that they use for how they come up with that product. It's so important to be inclusive, and it's something we have to practice regularly to make that conscious effort to be inclusive in the way we work. I think one of the really interesting conversations I've been having in my workplace recently is just how much women themselves also carry that bias, because we have been raised in societies that have been preferential towards men, and we work in male-dominated organisations and industries. We also naturally default to assuming that the male perspective is the better way. And so actually we also have to practice our thinking, our leadership mindsets around diversity and inclusion, really, in everything that we do.
So in thinking about solving this challenge, I'm wondering if people have seen examples where diversity has made a difference. So where there have been some solutions put in place and that responsible mindset has been activated, and maybe you've worked in teams where it has felt different. I'd love to hear from Cheryl. I know you have some experience in this. I'd love to hear from Rafna about your experience with this. Cheryl, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of kind of work around all forms of diversity over the last couple of years. So not kind of just gender, but diversity of teams in general, because, you know, there's all of these studies that have shown that diverse teams like outperform non-diverse teams by 2 to 1. So I've been looking at kind of neurodiversity, which is, you know, autism, ADHD, dyslexia, all of the different strengths that everybody from different diverse backgrounds brings. And I found, you know, when everyone's not looking in the same direction, when we've all got this very different lived experience, everyone brings their own perspective. So an example is, you know, where I currently am, we're a financial, we're a buy now, pay later. One of the things women tend to gravitate towards is when we're thinking of use cases, we also tend to think of abuse cases because we have either experienced it or we hear about it and we're much more sensitive to it. So it is something that women tend to kind of flag straight away, where it's like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's think about how somebody could be abused using this tool. Okay, you know what? We need to put different checks and measures in there, or we need to approach it a different way. Because, and this isn't a real example, but it might be nice that you want to open up, you know, your location to everybody, but let's just think about the implications of being a woman and what that might bring you. And let's maybe not do that. Let's make it, you know, opt in rather than opt out. So I think, you know, diverse opinions tend to think about these cases a lot more because we've got very different lived experiences.
Yeah, I agree with Cheryl. So in my line of work, when I work with the founders, they're thinking in they're bringing up with the idea with their own mindset. So when I involve with other diverse groups like more women and moms, and so I've experienced like when a product, we were discussing about a product, and one of the moms said, I won't buy, as a mom, I won't prefer to buy that because it's not safe for small kids. So if, and that product was meant for household usage. So it's kind of like, you know, when it like in a male dominator or a certain group of people that's in the founder level or bringing up the product, they're thinking about their line of way. But if there's a diverse group that comes in place in bringing up a product, they can chime in with their own experiences when they think. So as a mom, she thought about like how it would be safe for her to use in her house with small kids. So we changed the product in a way that can target those groups. So like, so when I think about it, customer experiences are different for different people, and as Cheryl brought up, like diversity and inclusion. I work with the Blind Institute of Technology, so they were more into how things should be accessible to differently able people. So yeah, so I've seen like when diverse people are included in building a product, I've seen that it's come out as an an awesome product that's accessible, or that's more market success. So yeah, so I've definitely believe that if we have more diversity, if we have more inclusion, it helps in building a better future compared to now.
Just thinking about this future state, right? there are a lot of emerging technologies on the horizon. Claire, you have experience working with IoT. I'm curious to know, have you overcome personal experience with gender bias, and how do you apply that in your work to make sure that we're carrying all of these things forward and actually challenging the stereotypes that exist?
So I think in terms of working with emerging technologies, so you hear a lot of buzzwords, or you hear IoT and everyone's like, what's IoT? And the way I like to think about that is how it's just collecting data and using that to help people with their decision making. So for example, where I am, we have a temperature and humidity sensor, but there are a bunch of other sensors. And if you think about, you know, with COVID, if people are entering a workplace or another location, like how do we track people coming in and out? But when you do that, you do need to be careful with the data that you collect. So when we go past tracking that sort of stuff, it could be when we collect the data, is it gender, when we mine that data, will there be gender bias? So we have to be very careful in some of those results, because what we want to do there is say, hey, from all this data, we noticed that this is a recommendation or an insight for you. But at the same time, we have to be careful because that might not be something that's suited to, or, you know, reveal some bias there. In terms of, I guess, gender bias that has come up and I've had to overcome, I was in an environment where there was a toxic colleague. And this was one where I was a technical lead and someone who, I guess, didn't give me a chance. And so for that instance, I had to figure out what's the tact here. Because when I join a company, I normally will build relationships. And, you know, everyone has a thing where they have to prove themselves. But in this instance, I felt like I had to change the tact to prove myself and gain their respect in that sense. It was a good story in the end. Like, we did build a relationship and, you know, good rapport, but it took a lot of work to get them to see that I'm worth my salt, right? I actually know what I'm talking about and I can, you know, overcome challenges. But that was one where I was hit with, hey, you're female and we don't think you're good, which doesn't often happen, but it has happened.
Yeah, so Claire, your story is not unique, right? This does happen across the industry. And Amanda, you have experience building teams. And I'm wondering what you look out for to make sure that engineers like Claire are having a better experience. And how do you go about building teams to make sure that diversity and inclusion are happening all across the organization?
Yeah, well, the first key is to sort of bring all of your colleagues up to speed on what your thoughts are and what you're looking for. We had a hiring standardization group at my company, and for a long while it was run by our CTO and all of our managers, who were all male. And at one point they realized that we had, I think at the time, 2 female engineers, and they said, how do we get more female engineers? And then they realized we can ask them. And so I was happy to come on board and start talking about different sort of microaggressive behaviors that I'd noticed in different people and interviews and that sort of thing, such as men who feel the need to, I don't want to point out men, such as people who feel the need to talk over you or do not give you a chance to ask questions or seem to be a little too explanative, is that a word? Who seem to over-explain everything a little bit too much. It's also the idea that we can talk about diversity and what it means to you, even sneak it into technical interviews and that sort of thing. I actually interviewed someone once, asked them about their thoughts on diversity, and they started off by talking about different female coding companies and groups, such as Black Girls Code, and the donations that they made to them, and somehow looped themselves around into talking about how we should be nice to people who code poorly. And that was very eye-opening for me of, you know, if this person was on the border technologically, they've now turned into a no, because whether or not they realize it, they have just associated women with bad code. And the idea that if I'm trying to talk about empowerment and forward thinking of different people, and you've managed to bring this around to, we can just be nice to them because they're not on the same level. That's very toxic. So sort of watching out for behaviors that can be overpowering, or people that do not show tendency or desire to listen as much as they talk.
Wow. Yes. And there are so many opportunities to get it right. That I'm really excited that all of you on the call are choosing to challenge in different ways. Cheryl, you have some experience in building teams. Do you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing a lot of thinking about kind of how we get more women in engineering because, everywhere I've worked at, I've definitely not worked at parity. We do a lot of looking at the initial funnel. So one of the things that we found is even at the job ad stage, we're actively repelling women because women read job ads very differently to the way men read job ads. So women will see a list of 9 mandatory things and they'll have 8 and they're like, oh, I can't do this job. And like a guy will literally look at it and go, I got none of them, but I'll be great. So it's about writing the job ad in the first place in a way that's not actively repelling women, and then going through the interview process. It's looking at values rather than, these particularly like get up here and do a whiteboard test. It's like, does this person have the right values? And we base a lot of recruitment on that because it's not necessarily about kind of these old technical style Google ways of interviewing anymore. Like we're just actively taking women out of the funnel by doing that.
Wow, that is so true. Natasha, you've thought a lot about organizational level development. What can we, all people in an organization, all genders, be doing to really challenge gender bias, both at the individual level and the organizational level?
Yeah, so I think it's from an individual point of view, I think it's really important for us to realize that we don't have to be in a formal position of power or a formal leadership role to make a difference in this space. We all wear many hats in our professions. If we are mentoring someone, then we can become their biggest champion to help them understand that it's okay to do things differently. I find one of the really big challenges for women in a male-dominated industry is that when they look upwards, they see a very specific style of leadership and they therefore then try to mimic that behaviour. But what we can do is champion young women and say it's okay to be your own style of leader. When we're advocating for our industries out in the community, we need to be normalising our type of work to young girls that we're speaking to. Make it clear that they have the choice of whatever career they like and they don't have to listen to society norms. I think from an organisation perspective, it's really important to look at the systematic processes in the company. So you can have all of the individuals in the world supporting gender inclusion, gender diversity, but if you've got systematic processes that bias against women, then you're never going to actually solve the problem. So really simple things like flexible work policies, how you count your resources, full-time equivalent versus an individual headcount when you've got a lot of part-time workers makes a big difference to how you treat your employees. So you need to systematically work through your organisational processes and make sure there is no gender bias. And to do that, you need to engage diverse people in that evaluation.
I love that, be your own style of leader. I think that could be a rallying cry for all of us out there to really think about that. Fatima, I know you're a leader in your own right. How does that resonate with you?
The thing is, like individually, I think what we can do is, first thing is we need to be aware of examples of gender bias patterns. And notice them, acknowledge them. We shouldn't be passive about these things and let them just go. We need to speak up. When we see something's wrong, just point it out. Don't be like passive and let it go. And also in terms of like organizational levels, I think one important thing is the training sessions, like training sessions, leadership trainings. It can be for all. Like it doesn't have to be only for those at higher levels. Because every one of us, we can be leaders in our own team or in our own community. So I think it's very important to have trainings regarding gender bias or all types of bias.
Yeah, that is so important to make it stick, right? You have to actually put things in place to help people understand it and take different actions. Jane, you've been leading something different for a long time in your community. Can you tell us a bit about where you've had success with gender inclusion and where that's led to positive outcomes and what you've observed and learned through that process?
Ever since I started my company and also volunteering for Women Who Code, I have to say I can see gender inclusion, led to positive outcomes every day. So one of the most recent examples we experienced was last year we partnered with VMware and Women Who Code Bangalore, and then we conducted about maybe 8-month training to have cloud community coaches inside of our community. And one of the coaches now moved from VMware to working for Google. And he is actually working on our IWD events with Google now, and also wanted to launch the new initiative with us under Women Who Code Taipei. So I have to say, gender inclusion, no matter what happens, during our process of, working as community events or, working as volunteers in our org, I have to say there are so many good things happens every day.
Excellent. And Rafna, you have a lot of experience with this too. Can you share a little bit about what you're doing, what you've learned?
Yes. So yeah, I wanted to add that empowering women in a way that makes sure that women are getting hired. So I'm working with women returning to work. So the main problem that they are facing is like when they get to when they submit their resume, people are seeing that it's a gap, and it's for either for childcare or something that they wanted to attend personally, so they left the job. So that gives them. So I wanted to mention that there's like a gendered assumptions that women tend to take break because they have kids or they have something, they manage more household things, so take care of household. So when hiring women, these gendered assumptions are there, these blind spots in making that decision in hiring some person. So when they took the break to childcare, for example, these people, when they are trying to return to work, they are getting that response back that there's nothing to show for last 2 years or 4 years. So what we are doing in returnship is giving them that confidence that they can get back into work. They are very well, they can do the work that's been assigned to. So working on more projects and making that resume more resonate to the job opportunities. And I wanted to say that when job opportunities are describing, like posted in a website, a company's website, it's all saying that high potential, and they are looking for smart, quick learner, and these are becoming a parent. They took a break. They haven't trained for becoming a mother, so they took the work on the go. So they are very quick learners. So it's implied in there. So those are the skills that mentioned without mentioning. So it's a skill to adapt to the new motherhood, raising a next generation. So it's all skills that's counted. It's not related to technology, but it's I think it's having patience and able to manage another human being is a skill. It's highly technical skills in its own way. So there's no wrong with hiring a person who took a break for childcare or something. And organizations like Women Who Code helps in a way to help these people get back into the job. So yeah, so hiring women, at least try to have a hiring event with organizations, women organizations like Women Who Code. Hiring members from Women Who Code helps in overcoming that bias, like unconscious bias that people just took a break when something happens. It's not that they took a break. They're working in their own way, and it's a skill as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
Rafna, I have to say a huge thank you for raising this notion of being a mother is a whole adventure in learning. I have a almost 2-year-old. I'm curious to know if we have any other parents on the call or people who are actively raising children, especially in this last year. We've had to learn how to be at-home Zoom school teachers and parents and career professionals. And so I really appreciate you raising that as a learning experience, because I learn something new every day without fail in that capacity. And it's no small thing. So thank you for elevating that. We've been talking about gender bias in general in technology. And before we go to our last question, I'm curious about this intersection of STEM. Natasha, you sit in technology and science and work in these spaces. And I'm curious about what Choose to Challenge looks like at that intersection.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that, right across the STEM practices, science, technology, engineering, maths and medicine, we face the same sort of problems with gender biases. Really, across all those industries, women engagement ranges from about 10% to 25%, which is quite low. And so we really need to make a strong effort right from the pipeline stage of getting women into the industry, right through to supporting them to step up into leadership roles. It's something that it's a multifaceted problem that requires lots of different solutions coming from different directions. It's about normalizing what girls can do right through, right back at primary school. It's about supporting women through education, and it's about supporting women in the workplace. And so that Choose to Challenge notion across all those industries is about what every individual can do. I mean, I think it's really important to understand that just making a difference to one person is contributing to the solution, right? We all can make a difference just to tell a story, support an individual, make a comment about a corporate policy. We all need to take responsibility to step up and challenge something that we see in our everyday world. And each little bit is going to make a difference to transition all of our disciplines across the STEM spectrum.
Definitely. And with that in mind, I'd love to close by asking everyone on this panel, what can we do about gender bias? International Women's Day is all about engaging everyone in the solution. And so I'd like to ask you to get creative and in 5 words or less, tell us what advice would you give to someone who is thinking about what they can do, who wants to choose to challenge and who wants to raise women up? Amanda, what are your 5 words?
Seek out supportive female communities. And if you can't find, create. Sorry, that's more than 5.
Fantastic. Cheryl.
Don't be a bystander. Women can do a lot of the work in doing this, but it takes everybody to actually make a change. So men speaking up is, I hate to say it, sometimes more powerful than women speaking up. So just don't be a bystander. Don't walk past it.
Claire.
So I think I'm cheating, but my words are inspire, start, impact, help. But what I mean by that is get inspired, see where you can have an impact, just get started. And actually, it doesn't have to be you. You can ask for help, find out who can help you on that mission.
Fatima.
I want to quote an amazing woman in leadership, Dr. Kirsten Ferguson. So she says, we all need to forget about the ladder concept to support one woman at a time. Instead, we need to think about a fishnet to raise up many. So I would say every change needs to start from up here.
Love that. Jane.
I would say find someone to mentor. We can see difference, among all of us, but it's starting from just one person, you can tell the difference.
Natasha.
I would say don't underestimate the power of one. You are one person, but you have incredible power to make a difference.
And Rafna.
I wanted to say that encourage all the people around you especially women and all the underrepresented people, encourage them to come out of their zone. Even if we don't find anyone, any ancestor in their line, but get out there, speak about what you care, fight for it, so that next generation don't have to waste time for fighting it. So let's fight.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for being here with us today. And thank you to everyone who's viewing this panel. I hope you all find a way to choose to challenge. A huge thank you from Women Who Code. Have a great rest of your day.